Right, so today we're going to be talking about Bus Force, which is one of the new plugins that Arturia have just released as part of their effects collection too. So first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Arturia for sending the plugins over. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure later on in the video we'll look at a few of the other plugins. But I really want to talk about Bus Force because what it is basically is a channel strip. But the way that it has been implemented for me is just pure, simple genius. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Right, so before we look at the plugin, let's just do a quick rundown of this loop that I'm working on so we've got a rough idea where we're at. So for the drums, I'm using Groove Agent 5 and mainly samples from the Lindrum. For the bass, I'm using the OB-XA from Arturia coming through Analog Lab V. So for the pads, I've got a few things laid up. First of all, the Selena V. I've got that layered with the vocoder V. And then I've got an arpeggiator coming through the CS80V. Again, all from Arturia and all running through Analog Lab V. For the lead, again, got two things layered up. First one coming out the SEM and the second coming from the CS80 again. Okay, so I would just like to say quickly, if the thought of watching me put together these tracks and having a little chat with me at the same time is something that appeals to you, go check me out on Twitch. I usually make the tracks for these videos like Mondays and Tuesdays. And then on a Thursday night, kind of Thursday evening European time, I'm working on like a full house track. So that kind of thing sounds good to you, go check out my Twitch page. Okay, so all together it sounds like this. And on my drum bus, I'm using the Bus Force plugin. So using the bypass effect, let's do an A and B. So you can hear that it's awesome. But first of all, before I talk about why I'm so much in love with this plugin, let's talk about what parallel processing actually is. So parallel processing in a nutshell is when you have your audio source and then you have that audio source duplicated, and on the duplicate you do some kind of audio processing. So I guess the most common example of that would be on a snare. So let me just solo my snare so we can have a listen to it. And I'm sending my snare to an auxiliary channel, and on that auxiliary channel where I'm doing my parallel processing, I have a reverb. So let's have a listen to that. Okay, so that's a kind of parallel processing that I think everybody is familiar with. So the difference between parallel processing and serial processing is with serial processing, you have your audio source and you feed that directly into an audio process and then maybe directly into another audio process in serial, as opposed to parallel, like what we're doing here with the reverb. So let's have a look at some serial processing. I'm sure you've all seen it before, but let's do it anyway. So let's bring up the arpeggiator, which, like I say, is the CS80. And then I'm running the CS80 in serial, like I say, firstly through the pre-treater from Arturia, again part of the effects collection. So let's have a listen to that. And then again in serial, running it through the Mini V. Sounds like this. And then again in serial, run it through the chorus June 60, sounds like this. And then finally, running it through the EQ Citril 295. Again, all of these plugins are part of the Arturia effects collection too. So let's have a listen to all of those serial effects bypassed. So the key difference, I guess, between running effects in serial and running effects in parallel is when you have effects in parallel, you have the dry signal still intact and you have an effect running parallel to it. Whereas when you run effects in serial, you don't actually hear the dry signal because the dry signal is being passed in serial through a range of effects. And to make things a little bit more complicated, let's go back to my snare. And like I say, I'm running the reverb in parallel, but on that parallel channel, I'm actually running the reverb through some more effects in serial. So we've basically got a combination of both. So the reverb that I'm using is the reverb intensity, again, part of the effects collection too. So let's have a listen to that. And then I'm running the reverb through a Cubase's gate. So let's have a listen to that. And you can hear I'm using the gate just to remove the end part of the reverb, make the reverb shorter, as it were. And then I'm running that through the EQ Citril 295. Just to make that reverb sit a little bit better in the mix. So as you can hear, we can have a lot of fun mixing and matching serial and parallel processing. And mixing and matching serial and parallel processing together is why I think that the bus force is such a genius concept of a plugin. So like I say, I have it on my drum bus. So let's just solo the drum bus. And again, I'll do an A-B with the plugin bypassed and unbypassed. And to do a breakdown of what this plugin is and how it works, what I'm actually going to do is mute this one and open up another instance, because what I really like about this plugin, or one of the many things I really like about this plugin, is every time I load it up on something, I do something completely different from what I did previously. And it's never better or worse, it's just always different. And plugins that can unleash creativity, I mean, they're worth the price of admission alone, if you ask me. So basically what we have here, let's break it down part by part. So we have an on-off switch, we have an input trim or an input gain. This section here is our visualizer, which will change depending on what we have selected along the bottom, or indeed in this part here. So to begin with, we have an EQ, works exactly like how an EQ would. It's just a 3-band EQ, so we have a low shelf, a high shelf, these curves which kind of give us that kind of Pultec-y kind of thing maybe, and then we have a mid-band. Okay, next we have a filter, just a high pass and low pass filter with some bumps if you want them. Then we have a compressor, works exactly as a compressor usually does. Really like this force, which changes the knee shape. Sounds really cool, but we'll get into that in a second. Next, we have a saturation section, so we can raise the harmonics. We can change between even order and odd order harmonics, and thick, which I haven't read the instructions, but I'm kind of guessing that thick is a mixture between even and odd harmonics. Then we have overdrive, and we have gain compensation at the bottom here. We have an output trim, and we also have a clipping section, so we can do some, I don't want to say soft clipping because it does sound like quite hard clipping. Again, I should really have read the instructions before I did this video, but yeah, we can clip on the way out so that we're basically getting some more distortion and limiting. Nice little effect. But what really sets this plugin apart from your regular channel strip plugins like this is these 3 faders or volume knobs here and this section here. So let's get into what this is and how it works. So I'm just going to double click on all these parameters just to reset everything. So let's just look at this first section here, which is called the dry path. If you can notice, we have a comp path and a sat path, which I have muted. Let me just turn off the clipping as well. So basically what we're going to hear through this dry path is just the dry signal. We can adjust the volume using the dial at the top. Now, this dry path, we can choose to keep it dry, or if we want, we can click this button here, and this will turn on the EQ. But as you can see, we have the option of turning that on and off. So I guess you can see where we're going next with this and why I absolutely love this thing. If we get onto the comp path, which if I unmute, turn the volume up and take these off, but actually can't take off the compressor on the compressor path, so the compressor is always on unless we turn it off here. You can see we have a parallel path, but this time with the compressor on, and we have the choice of having the filter and the EQ on or off, and we can mix that in parallel with our dry path. And if we look over to the saturation section, we can do the same thing, but we have to keep the saturation on this one, but we can have any combination of this EQ and filter that we want. So yeah, there's nothing much else to do but have a play about with it, see how it sounds, and then I'll compare it to the settings that I came up with earlier on today to see how similar or dissimilar they are to how my ears and taste was working earlier on in the day. So firstly, going to mute the comp path and the saturation path and just play about with the EQ section. So let's turn the EQ on and off on the dry path by using this button here. Cool. So I'm going to mute this, and next we're going to play with the compressor path. So let's unmute it. So I'm just going to play about with the compressor to begin with, and I'm going to go quite extreme just so I can really hear what the compressor is doing. Let's try that with the EQ and filter. So yeah, I think I'm going to have on this channel, I guess you can call it a channel, the compressor and the filter would have the EQ turned off. So I've actually got the reverb being sent into the drum bus, and I can really hear the saturation bringing out these little nuances and personality, especially in that reverb, that snare reverb. So let's try the overdrive, and I have to keep on top of this makeup gain because it's going to get loud. Yeah, I think I'm gonna try it like this. Maybe let's see what it sounds like with some of the other elements brought in, the compressor, filter and EQ. Oh, I had the filter on anyway there, so I think I'm going to leave it on because I like the sound of it. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is take advantage of the parallel processing. So I have 3 different flavors of drum bus parallel processing, and now if I unmute them, I can just use these dials to get a nice little blend. So let's see what we come up with. And let's do an A/B, a before and after. Without it, those drums that I did love when I was putting the beat together, they just sound dead without it. And let's compare this to the bus force that I set up earlier on. So completely different flavor, a completely different vibe. Let's bring in the rest of the instruments, sorry, and we can have a listen to how these sound within the context of the mix. So yeah, I'm liking both of them. Both of them have got very different feels. This one sounds a lot more heavy. I feel like this one sounds a bit more poppy. I guess I was in a different mood earlier on, but yeah, I mean, what more can I say about this plugin? Absolutely loving it. Such a simple concept, but just so well executed. Right, so I'm going to leave it there. There's not much more I can say about this bus force. If I don't leave it there, I will be here all night doing 10 different versions of this drum bus, because this plugin is just so simple to use, so intuitive, sounds great. You can tell that I'm in love with it, as I'm in love with most things that Arturia make. But before I start sounding like too much of a fanboy, which of course I am, let's leave it there. So I've been Craig Lopez. This has been Tutorialism. Now go make some music. Peace.